What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team. Mr. Ray, what's going on, Beast?
Life is good, Wes. It's cold and damp here in Canada, but other than that, life is good.
What's the temp?
The temp is probably 50, but the colors are changing on the leaves. You can see my normally green tree is like this really nice yellow.
Yeah.
That kind of bathes the whole room in yellow light. It's really nice.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, man.
And so teaching Wes art 101, the painting over to, is that your left shoulder, I assume?
That one or the other one?
The other one. I know it sounds like such a dumb question, but I never know if some cameras flip the image.
Yeah.
So
you also have that option in Zoom to flip your image.
Really?
Yeah.
So does that have a specific meaning behind it, or is it literally like a dude in a bathtub?
Well, it's a dude in a bathtub. It's an artist I worked with named Dylan. And so in this one, he's just a cowboy in the bathtub. And in this one, this was shortly after he broke his teeth in a bike accident. So that's why he really highlights the broken teeth there. And I think I got one more around the corner here. Yeah, so again, this again. So I think these were paintings he was working on when he busted out his teeth.
Oh, interesting.
So he just added that feature.
So he's an artist who paints pictures representative of himself.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Just about everything he does is himself in some kind of, journey state.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, anyway, I was just curious. I like you teaching me on art.
Yeah.
Morning, dudes. And Dima, I'm sorry I missed your call. I just saw Dima's hopped on. Sorry I missed your text message. I was crazy busy. I worked until like 10 p.m. when you texted me that night. But I'm going to MMA class this Saturday. Dima, if you'd like to join me.
MMA class?
Yeah. So, which I want to be, if it's okay with you, Ray, I'd like for that to be at least part of the topic of today.
Yeah.
So I would like to include this in Rhomas University eventually, where we have a whole fighting section. And I'm finding a similarity between the struggle of learning dance and the struggle of learning investments and the struggle of learning fighting. I'm going to assume I also have a guitar, and when I take my next class in guitar, I'm going to assume I'm going to find the same struggle. And that struggle is this. When you go to classes in these particular domains, there tends to be, as crazy as this sounds, there tends to be a lack of pragmatic destination. I'll rephrase that. In my opinion, the goal should be, first and foremost, to get to practical effectiveness. And this sounds so obvious, but I promise you, like, Ray, if you go out and dance somewhere or go and try to learn fighting somewhere, it's not the emphasis.
Right. That's why I recommended, that's why you recommend guys learning West Coast swing, because a couple of the basics will get you that pragmatic place in, whether it's at a bar or at a wedding or whatever.
Exactly. So there's two pillars that I've noticed. Number one is picking the most practical discipline. And then number two, it's picking the most practical curriculum to get you to that effectiveness. So here's what I mean. And efficient. So if you look at something like fighting, for instance, UFC 1 and 2 solved the issue of pillar number one. What is the most practical discipline? Now, just so we know, in professional fighting, it has since changed because everybody figured out jiu-jitsu, essentially. But when you go out there into the world, 99.9% of people do not know any disciplines. So if you had to pick a single discipline, in my opinion, it should be jiu-jitsu or just /MMA. So Royce Gracie, for those of you who don't know the history of this stuff, like Royce Gracie, they created
And I
UFC.
don't.
Okay.
So feel free.
So super cool, right? So you could think, okay, if we had to pick the most practical discipline of fighting, how would we do it? Well, we'd probably invite all disciplines from all over the world to come and fight. And we're going to put them in a cage and we're going to say, whoever wins is the best, right? That happened. Like that actually happens. Crazy as that sounds, that actually happened. That happened with UFC 1, 2, and maybe 3. And this little guy, I say little, I think he was 6 foot, 180 pounds. But in the fighting world, right, like there was no weight classes, there was no discipline, barriers, etc. It was crazy. And it was, I think, bare knuckles. Like you could wear gloves if you wanted to, and you didn't have to if you didn't want to. So this is the test model. So what happened was this 180 pound, 6 foot man who fought against Ken Shamrock and who fought against this guy named Kimbo, who I think was like, I don't know, 250 pounds, like well above the weight class of Royce Gracie. Long story short, Royce Gracie smoked all of them. I'd highly recommend to all the guys listening to this to go out and actually watch one or both of those series of matches. Now, so it's safe to say that we have the most practical discipline. And now we have an evolved version of that. So like if you go to an MMA class, they're going to have a hybrid of jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, etc. So we have the most practical discipline, let's just say. And by the way, you could spend the rest of your life studying an impractical discipline. So what UFC 1 and 2 showed is like the guy who practiced karate for his entire life or who practiced kung fu or something, unfortunately, didn't work. And that's, if you think about it, like how horrible is that? And if you actually can, if you think I'm wrong on this, you can just go to YouTube and type in like, let's just say Muay Thai versus boxing, just to show superior disciplines. You will have a championship boxer versus a championship kickboxer or Muay Thai kickboxer. And the boxer loses basically in every single video I've seen. And not just loses, but gets completely destroyed, right? So the first thing is picking a practical discipline. The second thing is, what is the time to practical effectiveness within that discipline? And even if you pick the right discipline, you can go off in perpetuity and never be able to be effective at that craft. Here's my point. In dance, I noticed the same thing. I practiced salsa dance for probably 7 years. And I'm not kidding. Before I got practically effective. Practically effective being defined as if I could dance one full song. And that sounds ridiculous, but I promise you, it actually happened to me. And here's the reason why, is because when you go into places to study, right, like let's just say like fighting or dancing, you find yourself in random classes that are not necessarily sequentially connected, if that makes sense. And oftentimes, I actually think about it in what I call the reverse iceberg approach. In skill acquisition, most people say that, the benefit of the iceberg is about 90% of the mass being under the surface layer of the water, right? Like that's the magic of the iceberg. Like that's the beauty that you can't see. And Ray, when you and I talk about our craft, that's exactly the magic, right? Like become an absolute master of your craft, and 90% of the work people are not going to see, and 90% of the demonstration people are not going to see, but that's what allows you to give that top 10%, However, I think of it in the reverse in skill acquisition. Like I'm not trying to become a master jiu-jitsu player. I'm not trying to be Conor McGregor. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to become practically effective. And in that particular case, I think it's more about actually connecting the full loop of dots rather than learning, let's say, one move and becoming a superior master at it, or learning a 500 moves because you go to the classes and you just get random classes. And honestly, in that situation, when you go to random classes, let's say in fighting, I have noticed that it's kind of up to the instructor's like discretion and almost what he feels like that day. Like not like, where is Ray in the total curriculum of 15 most effective moves from end to end. And where is he? And he hasn't studied move 7 yet. So rather, he picks move 554 that looks cool, but then when you get on the mat, you might use it once in your career. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So tell me, why do you think fighting should be such a pillar of the Rhomas program?
Oh man. So number one, for two major reasons. Number one, for the actual practical reason that, God forbid, a neighbor pisses you off, right? And you need to handle your stuff. You know how to handle it. So if you actually do ever get into some sort of physical altercation, that you actually know what to do. I promise you, if you do not know what to do, then you leave it up to a coin toss. And I would say if the person's bigger than you, it's a lopsided coin, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, let's do this. Let's think about it this way. If you were going to get in a fight today, you went to the grocery store, and all of a sudden some guy, I actually had this happen to a friend, like a grown man, he's in his 50s, where like the guy bumped his car or something with a grocery cart, and both men are in their 50s. And guess what? It escalates. And my 50-year-old friend is in front of his wife, and this other guy was not afraid to throw down. And the other guy was wrong, right? So it's like as horrible of a situation that you could think of, right? Other guy's wrong. And then he basically says, whatever, what are you going to do about it? Right? You know what I mean? Like in front of your wife.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this, Ray. Do you have any training in fighting at all?
Zero.
Okay.
I was more of like a choir and like art class kind of guy.
Yeah. So let's think about this. So literally, walk me through the structure in which you would approach that? So let's say all communication is off now. Guy pushes you. Your back is against the wall, so you can't do what they tell you to do in health class, which is like run away, right? Like blow your rape whistle and run away, right? Yeah. So walk me through what you would do.
Hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Well, I think I would just try to, de-escalate and defend. I think that's what I would try to do, because like
de-escalate's done.
Yeah. Okay. So no, but like, maybe grip his shirt and keep my arms kind of stiff to keep distance. Right. And then like, hopefully tire himself out. Like I could try and land some punches, but I'm not sure. I think like realistically, like in my head, obviously I do all kinds of butterfly kicks and whatnot. Right. Exactly. Or like, yeah. Right.
Yeah. Some sort of like roundhouse kick right to the chin.
Yeah. Or Don saying like, this is survival. So Don saying like knee to the nuts.
Yeah.
Gouge the eyes, like, fight dirty.
Yep.
But no, I think I would just kind of like just be defensive and let him tire himself out, or like let the frustration kind of like cool him off.
Got it. Okay. Do you mind if I repeat this to you?
Please.
What I hear you saying. And dude, this is why I want this to be in the curriculum, because honestly, so now that we're talking about, the goal is practical effectiveness. Practical effectiveness, not meaning you need to become Conor McGregor, but meaning that you could be, and I mean practical in this domain. If you learn practical effectiveness, you could beat 99% of men out there if needed, because most men do not train at all. They actually if I had asked them the same question, they would give me the similar version of an answer that you just gave, right? So first things first, what most men think of as fighting is actually completely wrong. And Ray, respectfully, what you just said is exactly what most men would say. Is some sort of hockey style fighting.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so here's the thing. Funny thing is, most men think that the way to fight and the distance at which to fight, which I want you to think through that dimension, they think that's how a fight. That's actually the most dangerous situation that you could have, which is medium distance. So you have three options first. If we think of this like a decision tree, first is what we're safer in two distances, right? The safest distance is the furthest away, where you cannot strike me with your legs or your fists. But weirdly enough, that is what most men go to when they think about a fight. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to grab him or I'm going to punch him. Well, if he's trained or bigger than you, then your chances are minimal. So actually, the very thing that you think he's doing right, you're actually doing the most wrong at the on the feet level. On the feet level, from my understanding, safest distance number 1, get away, right? If that's not possible and there's a wall behind you, what's safest distance number 2? Completely together, which is counterintuitive, right?
Right. Now that I think of a boxing match, when like one of the guys is gassed and tired, he kind of gets in and locks arms with the guy so he can take a few breaths without getting punched.
Exactly. So now here's the thing. And by the way, I'm very much like a new student in all of this. I've studied fighting in the past, but like I'm trying to now put it in a curriculum where men can quickly adopt it easily. And even if you've never even done it physically, that just teaching would help you. So for instance, what are you trying to protect against? Right? Like if you're trying to close the distance, what is the most dangerous thing that you're trying to protect against?
Up close, you mean, or at medium?
Yeah. Why would you want to close the gap?
Okay, I would close the gap so he can't draw back and with great force hit me.
Exactly. So the thing that you're trying to protect against, and John Danaher talked about this system, which was phenomenal. John Danaher is arguably the best jiu-jitsu coach of all time. He talked about this in Joe Rogan podcast. So start to break this down. Number 1, you break through the distance. Why do you want to break through the distance? Well, because a human being can generate such large amounts of kinetic energy through twisting the hips, through basically coming from the ground. The way that he talks about it is think about one of the most explosive games in the Olympics, which is the javelin throw. You give a human being this ability to torque their body, to move in such a rate, to throw something an incredible distance, right? Well, the reason is because they can generate kinetic energy. Versus, if you think about what if you put that same Olympian on their knees? They're not going to be able to throw that javelin anywhere even close to the distance that they could when they were on their feet. So similarly, you are trying to protect yourself against that kinetic energy. The last thing that you want is that kinetic energy coming through a kick or coming through a punch directly at your face. Now, why is your face very important? Like what's so special about your face in this particular situation?
It's beautiful.
Yes, number 1.
It's what attracted my wife to me.
Yes, number 2.
And
what is it? House. So it's technically not your face. It's
your head. It's my brain, my
Exactly.
eyes, my brain that I need to think, my eyes I need to see, and my nose I need to breathe.
Yeah. So the biggest thing there is your brain. And just as a weird little fun fact, your eyes are actually brain. It's actually exposed brain through the skull. So yes, you're trying to protect your brain. Yeah, you're trying to protect your brain. And one of the major reasons you're trying to protect your brain is because if he punches you or kicks you, specifically in a certain way, it will knock your brain, that force will knock your brain into the side of the skull, and therefore you have a concussion and will likely be knocked out. Right? This is the thing that we see in the UFC or we see on movies. Like, you do not want that to happen. Why? Because if you're knocked out, then that guy he could kill you, right? Like, he could have killed you from that blow. So,
or you've failed, like, no offense, but like if you're knocked out, I think most people, I would expect most people would declare victory and walk off the field at that point if they knocked somebody out. So like, or he could stomp you into hamburger meat too. Yep. Obviously we don't want that, but I think we want to avoid that injury. And then you knocked out, you don't really have the motor function to protect your face as you fall to the ground either, right? There's like
exactly. Oh yeah.
Concuss yourself again, and when you hit the ground, or die when you hit the ground.
Exactly. So let's define practical effectiveness in this particular situation to be able to defend your wife to completion, right? So what you've effectively done, is the reverse of that. If this male knocks you out, you cannot defend your wife, right?
Yeah.
So first thing, right? You've got 3 different distances. Number 1, safest distance is furthest apart, where he's got no chance to kick you or punch you. Second safest distance is to get as close together as possible because you remove his kinetic energy. Now, that brings us a problem. The problem is, how do you actually close the distance? Because if you ever watch, like, for instance, Conor McGregor fighting Jose Aldo, I believe it was, where Jose Aldo lunged at Conor McGregor, very first move out of the gate, tried to close the distance, threw a punch, and then Conor McGregor slipped a punch right under his chin and knocked him out. So that is a very real concern. How do you dramatically reduce the probability of that? Well, number one, just so everybody knows, the probability of actually getting knocked out is already very small. Like, for instance, Ray, if you don't mind me asking, well, I won't force you to say your age. In your multiple decades of
45.
Living, okay, 45, right? How many times in person have you seen somebody get knocked out? Like
0.
Cold. 0, right? So just think about that.
Other than
0.
like Bruce Willis in a movie, like 0.
Exactly, 0. Now, it is still possible. I've seen many in-person fights. I've only seen one actual knockout.
And was this knockout delivered by someone who knew what they were doing and was kind of like a practiced expert?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could tell. Like, it was a street fight, but you could tell. You can tell when somebody's trained fighting. Like, somebody who's not trained fighting, like, kind of does all these like weird stances. A trained fighter will sit there and like, you're like, oh shit, this is going to be, So now you still want to reduce the probability of getting knocked out, even though the probability is very small. You want to close the distance. Knowing that the probability is small should actually give you a level of confidence too. Because if you think that you're going to get knocked out closing that distance, like, you have to understand the real numbers here. But you reduce the probability. I don't want to say to 0 because nothing is 0% risk, right? But the way you do that, your most vulnerable part of your face, right, is anywhere from your ear lobe down to the front of your chin, right? This jaw piece. If you ever notice where boxers and everybody and trained fighters are aiming, it's basically hit them on the button, hit them right here. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they twist their knuckles, twist their fist, right, to land with one of the front 2 knuckles. Why? Because you're focusing so much force into a very small location.
A bullet. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Plus, your knuckles, your outer 2 knuckles are the bone structure is at a diagonal here. So if you hit somebody here, it's called a boxer's fracture, I believe. You can break these 2 knuckles very easily. So anyway, so that's why somebody will punch like that, or a trained fighter will punch like that. And they're aiming to knock you out, and they're aiming for your jaw. So you just take the inverse of that. What do you do when you're closing the distance? You tuck your chin, right? And then you protect your head. So if I ran at you 150 times, Ray, like this, right? Protecting my ears, protecting my chin, protecting my face, right? I ran at you. I would be willing to bet, if we were really simulating fight, that you would not be able to knock me out in 100 times, right? So we reduce that probability very, very small. Plus, most people have no idea what they're doing in fighting. So they don't know how to strike properly. They don't know how to throw an uppercut properly. So
adrenaline's pumping.
Exactly.
They're emotional.
So that's how you close the distance. Tuck your chin, protect the head, go directly into the human, right? Get up against their chest. Now, the way they teach it in like MMA is you would bull charge at their chest and then immediately grab around them, right? You're trying to control their center of gravity. Anyway, we'll go through the details when I outline all this completely. But what's the next step? So you've closed the distance, and therefore you've removed their kinetic energy potential to throw a massively devastating kick or punch at your face. What's the next step?
Well, the goal is to survive the attack. Is the goal to survive the attack or immobilize the assailant?
Yeah, let's say like immobilize completely, if not submit him, knock him out, render him unconscious. Yeah.
Like erase the threat. The next move, so close the distance, is come up close, protecting the face and the chin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you grab him, again, you're exposing your face. So I guess a knee to the stomach would be the first thought.
Good question. You're still thinking striking. Mm-hmm. So now John Danaher, when he was on Joe Rogan, explained this in 4 categories, but I'm actually going to throw a 5th one in there because I know I have John's curriculum. I bought it. And just so everybody knows, I've literally spent thousands of dollars on this stuff, and I'm trying to synthesize it all down.
Oh, you say that about everything.
No, I just spent $500 last night on more classes, and I just spent $500 on 5 private lessons as well. So that's already $1,000 right there.
Private lessons jiu-jitsu or private lessons MMA?
Okay. Yeah. So the intermediary step is, number 1, you close the gap and you want to break his center of gravity. One way you could do that, there's several throws and there's several ways of getting people to the ground, but one way I could do that is I would grab around your waistline, your belt line, and squeeze really hard, right? You can imagine what this would do, right, is it would make you kind of stand up, right? Like almost on your tippy toes. If I squeeze and pull up.
And protect from gay sex, really.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like that's what the guy's thinking.
Yeah. Right. So if you can imagine, my head is around your chest, right, area, and I squeeze up, and this all happens very quickly. So I'm not hanging out there. And yes, even if you were to punch me, would it sting or could it cut me? Of course it could. Is it going to knock me out? No, because my head is secure in your chest. You're not going to be able to like punch me so hard it's going to knock my head off your chest, right? And remember, you can't twist or torque or anything because you're kind of like this at this point. So you're punching like that, right?
Right. So close the gap, protect the face and chin and head, grab like bear hug or whatever, like kind of waist hug.
Yep.
To have him distort his center of gravity.
Yeah, exactly. And Donovan, so yeah, keep me honest to this stuff. Donovan's saying he was in junior UFC and it's his favorite sport to watch, and he can confirm this is solid advice. So that's cool. That's good to get the feedback.
Don, I wish you could go to LA and whoop Wes's ass, because all he's doing right now is a lot of talking.
Yeah. So now again, there's lots of different ways to get to all of these, but here's the broad strokes. So you break the center of gravity. You're trying to get the guy to the ground, right? Now you've gotten the guy to the ground. Again, you've alleviated the kinetic energy even more, right? Now, what's the next step you have to do? What if you think about a man on the ground and you both are on the ground? What is the most powerful weaponry he has on the ground? Think of his human body. What's the most powerful part of his human body?
So I think knees, like striking with the knees.
Yep, his legs. Right?
Yeah, his legs. Yeah.
So now, what do you have to do? Now in jiu-jitsu, they call the legs the guard. Right? Exactly. Gunther's exactly correct. Because the legs are the most powerful piece on the human body, you need to get what's called past the legs. If you ever watch UFC or something or a jiu-jitsu match, what they'll say is like, oh, he's in the guy's guard, which means that he is wrapped up inside of the guy's legs, essentially, right? He has not gotten past the guy's legs. That's still a major danger point. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, Ray, for instance, if you tackled me, what I would first do is I would try to get you inside of my legs and wrap you around right in my legs.
So like bear hug with the legs?
Exactly. Which, right, sounds, I can tell by your facial expressions, that sounds counterintuitive.
Right.
But if you study jiu-jitsu, it's like it's an extremely advantageous position for me to be in. But you think you're winning. But as long as you're inside of my legs, I can control you. Right? I can pull you forward. I can grab your head. I could punch you from that distance. I could pull you. I could arm lock you, or I could break your arm that way. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But so you have to get past my legs, right? That's the next step. First step, close the distance, right? And second step, get the person to the ground. Third step, get past the legs. Now, if you've done that so far, to me, let's say, you are in an unbelievably disproportionately advantageous position. Because effectively, think about what that means. Your whole body is now attacking half of my body. And in particular, that half is the weaker half. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if we're laying on the ground and you are past my hips, I cannot use my legs against you. But you still have your entire body. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, Donovan's saying just by tightening your legs around your opponent's abdomen can make them pass out. Yeah. It's
a Bond, kind of like a Lady Bond villain, right?
Dude, it's crazy. And
Donovan,
we'll get into
the Lady Bond villains.
That's right. That's right. So if you think about this, you are now using your entire body against half of my weaker part of my body. What's the next step, if you had to guess?
Well, I think that I'm thinking of jiu-jitsu. I think like a kind of a sleeper move to knock him out. Like I think I think that would be the ultimate goal. I'm not sure if there are steps. I suppose to do that you would have to get behind the guy, or at least on the side.
Yep, almost. So
time out for my naive understanding. Close the distance gap, protecting the face and chin. Mm-hmm. Bear hug to get him off the center of gravity, get him to the ground. Get past the legs means he's on the ground, I'm on top of him, and to prevent the knees from coming up at me. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? Let's say I'm on top of him. Mm-hmm. What does get past the legs mean?
So one way it could look is that is that you are perpendicular. Your torso is perpendicular to his torso,
Okay.
like a crucifix, you know?
Yeah.
So
Or
now,
you're administering CPR kind of position.
yes, however, with no space, and this is very important once you get to the ground, it's basically think of yourself like a boa constrictor, right? No, the key to all of this stuff is no space, because if I'm trained and all of a sudden you try to get it past my legs, but you leave a bunch of space, what am I going to do? I'm just going to move so I can easily like put you back into my legs, right? Or easily get up to the ground, get up to my feet. You do not want that. Why? Because now we're in that medium fighting range distance, and that's an issue. So think of all of these as the inverse. In order to have the most effective offense, you need the most effective defense. So think in terms of, okay, well, you got me to the ground to reduce my ability to knock you out. You then got past my legs to reduce my probability that I knee you in the face or I kick you in the chin, again, knocking you out or giving you some serious damage. What's the next most powerful thing that I have on my body that you have not solved for yet?
Head, hands.
Exactly. So your whole body is now past my hips, but I still have my hands. And I have my elbows, right? So I've got my arms, right? So what do you think you need to do?
Get past the arms.
Exactly. Figure out some sort of way to neutralize my arms and put yourself in a position where you're still not in knockout range or anything like that, or in chokeable range, etc. So the real answer there, what John Danaher says, is you work yourself through a series of pins, right? Which basically means, think about this. You're trying to position yourself. In jiu-jitsu, they say position before submission. Get proper position first. So, Ray, what you were saying was actually the last piece. You're saying, hey, well, I would try to go and choke him or something like that. But you have not gained position yet. So think of it like rungs of a ladder. You're trying to jump too many rungs of that ladder. If you do that, then you leave too much space. There's room for error. And all of a sudden, we've just blown up our plan, right? So technically what you do, you're trying to position yourself. So you're rendering the rest of his like physical, hurtful part of his bodies to you, right? Like his arms, like you're trying to neutralize them. Now there's a whole bunch of ways to doing that, but like, let's just say you're working, if you can imagine, you're snaking yourself now up his torso, right? The more of your physical mass that you have on top of like my upper, let's say 20% of my chest, the less these become effective. So if you can imagine
because you're closing the distance again.
Exactly. Right. Now, let's say you're up here. Now you could get on top of me, let's say, and you could mount me, right? Which is one of the worst positions that I could be in. Now all of your body is on, let's say, my pecs, right? You could even hold my arms. If you get that visual, you are straddled against my chest, right? You could do you could hold my wrist, but which, by the way, if you ever want to see a grown man frustrated beyond all belief, mount him on top of his chest, right? And hold his wrists. And he will try to do let me ask you this. What would you try to do if I was mounting your chest and holding your wrist?
Yeah, I'm instantly like reminded of my older brother doing that to me, or like, hitting me with my own hand saying, why are you hitting yourself, Ray? That kind of, it's extremely frustrating and triggering.
Yeah. Now think about this. If I did it in the right way and I pinched my knees on on you right under your armpits, where could you not go? Like where would you think you want to go?
Well, the assailant can't, if the knees are under the armpit, the assailant has no kind of arm mobility. Yeah,
no arm mobility. So now I'm holding your wrist like this, right? My knees are pinched under your armpits, right? What you're probably going to do first, if you're untrained especially, is you're going to try to like kip up. You're going to try to like run your hips up, or you're going to try to go like north and south.
Buck them off. Yeah, exactly.
But think about it. All of my mass is on my knees. So I also have some like flexibility. Like I've got some what do they call it on a bike? Hydraulics. Shocks. Exactly. Yeah. I've got shocks to be able to absorb that. If you kick up as high as you can, good luck trying to get me off your chest. Now, yes, if I'm maybe sitting down lower on your belly, that might be a different story, but there's ways of me defending that too. So now I've got my knees under your armpits and I'm squeezing hard as hell, right? Which is barely taking any of my energy, but you're flailing. What are you losing simultaneously with each flail and trying to like do all this stuff? What are you losing?
Energy.
Exactly. I'm also sitting on your chest. What are you losing?
Oxygen.
Exactly. Right. You're also using more of both of those things because you're getting frustrated. So adrenaline is going massively throughout your body. You're about to get adrenaline burnout, like et cetera. Right. If you've ever been in a physical fight before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like the energy goes like this, right?
Yeah.
So not
Heart
only like,
pounding.
oh, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we were trying to do with your arms, I'm holding your wrists. Now, if you could imagine a male of even moderate strength now focusing his full body weight on your chest, and I don't even have to use my arm strength. What could I use to pin your wrist down? Like, I don't have to use my biceps. Does that make sense? All I have to do, lean over slightly.
Yeah, gravity.
Exactly. I'm using the gravity and all of
Body
my weight
weight.
on my body on your two wrists. There's no chance as an untrained fighter you're going to be able to break that. If you ever want to see a really good video of this particular position, go on YouTube. And guys in the chat, if you've seen this, let me know. I forget the guy's name, but it was some like major UFC fighter, like famous UFC fighter in a restaurant. This guy came up to him and messed with him, and basically he put him in this position and then was just holding. And this guy's like, and I think basically for like 12 minutes until like the security guards came, something like that. I'll have to find it for you guys, but that's an example of this position. Now, you could just stay there. That's all you could do to me. Let's say you were on top of me. You could do that until the authorities come, right? Until you called an adult to come and join, right? Now, that is effective enough. You've effectively protected your wife and yourself, right? Now, let's say if the goal was submission, then you would move from that position through whatever chokes you would learn, right? Or arm breaks. However, what I would say in those particular situations is if you find yourself in that position, what I would personally recommend you do is you go for a choke submission, or what technically a strangle submission. So let's talk about that. You could theoretically win a match by getting somebody to tap out, right? You could do that through an elbow break, you get an arm break, etc. And those are very painful. But oftentimes, let's say in a physical altercation on the street, you do have some maniacs out there who would not tap, essentially. And you would say, well, hey man, like back off because I'm about to break your arm, right? And maybe he just accepts it. Maybe he's drunk. Maybe he's on some sort of other chemicals where he can't really feel it that much, right? So I would say you might want to consider, if it's a really life or death situation, you might want to consider an actual stranglehold. Now, little quick science on strangleholds. What's the difference, and Ray, I'm going to put you on the spot here, between a choke and a strangle?
Does one, no idea, first of all.
Yep.
Second, does one involve closing off the oxygen and the other doesn't?
Exactly. One is an oxygen, right, depletion, which how long do you think somebody can survive or before they black out? Because you're not trying to kill anybody. I've never recommended killing anybody. You're trying to like protect your family.
Neutralize the threat.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So how long can somebody survive off of oxygen or before they pass out?
I say if you've got a good strangle, or if you've got a good lock on their neck, I mean, I would say maybe 30 seconds of struggle before they go to sleep.
Well, yeah. So the real answer is think about how long could you hold your breath?
Yeah.
So how
Wim Hof, I can do a minute and a half. But if I'm in a fight, like unprepared, yeah, it would be way less.
Yeah. So the real answer is anywhere between 30 seconds to probably a maximum, I think, of like 5 minutes. Like that's, I think that's like probably the most recorded,
that's like a guy who practiced.
Exactly.
Right. And,
so, but that is,
and who's genetically, and probably that guy's probably a genetic freak too. Right.
Yeah.
Again, so all these things are unlikely to be in your assailant.
I'd probably say you should plan in a fight for probably like a minute to 2 minutes, which by the way, is not a small period of time. Right. So the other option, that's a chokehold. That's a choke, right? You're cutting off the oxygen supply. However, a stranglehold, from my understanding, I think I'm getting those terms right, is cutting off the blood supply to the brain. How long do you think that will last before you go under in terms of blacking out? How much time do you think you have?
I think probably less.
Yeah, I think it's like 6 to 10 seconds, something like that. Right? Gunther's saying 30 seconds. It's close. It's 6 to 10 seconds. You're cutting off the blood supply. And by the way, you cannot train yourself. Right? So Gunther's saying David Blaine, yes, he trained himself to hold his breath. You cannot train yourself.
Hold your blood.
Exactly. To have a lack of oxygen going to the brain. So if you look at the average, if you look at a male neck, it's anywhere from 14 inches in circumference to probably 20 inches, 18.
Gunther's probably 25 inches.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's a lot, John Danaher teaches, there's a lot of hardware in here. So if you can start to learn how to do strangleholds, which is cut off the blood supply.
Practice on your wife.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that is where it would be most effective. And you just have to get to position enough to do that and be able to hold it for 6 to 10 seconds. Right. Now, that is what I would personally recommend you practice for. If we talk about practical effectiveness, okay, how do I close the distance? How do I get my opponent to the floor? How do I get past his legs? How do I control his upper torso and eventually his arms? Then how do I get to a position of submission if I needed to? Now, here's the cool thing about submissions. Like when you get to a stranglehold, you do not have to execute it. But if you did what I just said and you positioned yourself correctly, you have complete control. Like no matter, Ray, if you did it to me effectively and you learned how to wedge your body under my arms and around my armpits and so on, there's a whole bunch of things you can do there. There's a series of things that you can do to get there. If you got me there, I could not do anything. Right. And especially if I was completely untrained, I could not do anything. Just go on YouTube and test some of these things. Like go look at like jujitsu coach. There's a jujitsu guy who just did this to a guy in 7-Eleven not too long ago, a couple months ago. Right. The guy and they put it on Facebook Live. Like he literally had the guy right in, I believe, a triangle, right? Held his arms positioned correctly and also had so much control where he still had his arms free to be able to pull out his phone, put his phone up at like a tilt on like a bag of chips or something, right? And then do a Facebook Live. And this guy who was freaking out earlier can do nothing because he's wrapped up like this. And then he just held him there, right? So that's what I would say. That is practical effectiveness. Now, what is the time to practical effectiveness? Well, I only want to study the most effective moves through that entire connective chain. Does that make sense? But if I just go to random classes, I might only learn one section of those categories of moves. And in my opinion, I could do that for the next 3 years and never get to practical effectiveness. So what I'm trying to do in fighting is, that's why I'm spending so much money on it, trying to figure out in each one of those steps, what is the 5% that make up for 95% of the difference? So as soon as I have all of that, but right now, just for today, that's like what I have at a high level. And even if you just use that, because I've tried this on the mat, I've taken this from different sources and we get to go and we actually get to we put on gloves, we put on sparring gloves, and then the coach just says, okay, you got 8 minutes, go. Right. So I'm trying to use all those. And dude, I can tell you what the stuff that I just told you, incredibly effective. Like it's unbelievable. I wish I would have learned it when I was 12. So Ray, any questions, comments, critiques?
Yeah. So what would be your recommendation for someone who has never had any fight training before, such as myself? Like talking to my personal trainer, he said he loves jiu-jitsu. He does jiu-jitsu all the time. He says, start with a kind of like jiu-jitsu dojos usually have a like $30 for unlimited classes in your first month or some kind of deal like that. So he recommended do that, then get personal, like one-on-one sessions with, one of the teachers who you kind of jive with there. Yeah. To kind of sharpen up your skills. So like that was my personal trainer's recommendation in terms of learning how to fight. How's that sound to you? Or what do you recommend?
I would say in a perfect world, if you can actually go to an MMA gym, right? So
just from a standing still, from like without any training whatsoever.
Absolutely. 100%.
Kaizen says buy a gun.
Yeah. Kaizen. What do they say? Like, God made man and cult made them equal or something like that. The gun manufacturer. So I would actually recommend going to an MMA gym. Now let's assume in a perfect world that it's a high quality instructor there. The instructor that I'm studying from, actually, he fought, I believe, in the UFC, if not UFC, then Bellator, etc.
So I won't get my face flattened at an MMA gym.
No.
Okay.
No. You could, like, if you go to the more advanced classes, and I've been dumb enough to go to these classes, and these guys are not particularly nice. Like, they're actually training to go into to professional fighting. but you don't have to, right? You go into an MMA gym and they've got like intro level classes, et cetera. The reason I say that is because there is a certain percentage, of moves in, let's say, even jujitsu or karate or kung fu that leave you massively vulnerable, right? But are perfectly acceptable inside of the competition of karate or taekwondo.
You get the points or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
So you could spend, if your goal, again, if you defined your practical effectiveness of like, no, I don't want to go and compete in UFC, or I don't want to go compete in a jiu-jitsu match. I want to be able to, I want to be able to defend my wife. The point system of jiu-jitsu doesn't matter to me, right? So I don't care that I can do these fancy lockups and so on. Like, for instance, I don't really have an interest in focusing a ton of time on, let's say, leg locks, because again, that what I talked about before. My goal is to be able to quickly, like, get my opponent down and put him unconscious if I need to. So that is my practical effectiveness North Star. Okay, how do I get there as quickly as possible? So I don't need to spend time on the other stuff. Now, once I reach that practical effectiveness level, then I can go off and do like the hobby type of stuff within that domain. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's why my vote would be that you try to figure out if there's an MMA gym close to you that you can go and actually study this stuff.
Because those are that is the fastest way to practical effectiveness of self-defense, real world self-defense.
I'll give you an example. Now, if it's a legit MMA gym, they will integrate jiu-jitsu inside of it, and they'll integrate wrestling inside of it. They'll integrate striking inside of it. I'll give you an example. I studied at this jiu-jitsu gym for a little while over near my apartment. Then I went to this MMA gym, and this guy got on top of me, and he's like, I could punch you in the face right now. And in fact, we were doing light sparring, so he actually was like, like hitting me, like, not super hard, but like, and I was like,
demonstrating your vulnerability.
Exactly. Yeah. He's like, that's the difference between what you learned over there at that gym in jiu-jitsu. He's like, yes, that's a practical, effective jiu-jitsu move, but I know how to defend it. And now your face is completely vulnerable. And if I wanted to be mean, I would just murder you right now. Right. I was like, that's a pretty good point. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Don raises an interesting point that, like, everything you're saying is accurate, but actual street fights are usually, I think he's saying, very messy, right? And undisciplined. Practicing awareness and the basics or fundamentals will be the most effective method. So what does he mean by practicing awareness? Like situational awareness.
Yeah. So if we expand it even larger, right? Like the best distance would actually be not getting even in the slippery slope to begin with. So for instance, I imagine if I looked at the data of, like, let's say street fights, probably I could remove 90% of the threat by not going to bars.
Or at last call, or like being at a bar at last call. Yeah.
100%. 100%. So that right there alone. Now, what I would push on Don a little bit here is, like, if you go on YouTube, there's this great fight. It was like trained fighter versus gangster fighter. Like, you can actually see this stuff in real world. So don't just take my advice for it. Like, so you can actually see the closing of the distance, the taking down, etc. Right. And all the stuff that I told you earlier, of those guys, you can YouTube all of this stuff. So I think getting the person to the ground is one of the most effective things that you can do. And I've seen many fights, and again, go on YouTube, many fights that actually do go through these stages if you pay close enough attention to them. And of course, the fights are messy, right? There's no doubt. It's not as clean as I'm saying. But going from what Ray just said earlier, that's why I asked the question earlier, the most messy would be you just grab the guy's shirt.
And staying in middle distance. Yeah,
exactly. It's a hockey fight, right? You grab my shirt, I grab your shirt, and we're just trying to knock each other out. And like talk about messy. That's like the most messy. And I've seen many fights that start and end exactly like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what's situational awareness in a fight?
Well, so I mean, we could bring Don on to ask him, but my assumption of situational awareness would, number one, be aware of, like, your surroundings, right? So don't go to the bar, etc. Number two, knowing what the situation is. Okay,
does he have 10 friends with him?
Exactly. Am I about to fight 4 people? So I can tell you right now, there's no discipline that's going to teach you how to fight 4 people. That's like
at
out
the
of
same
the
time.
Yeah, exactly. And And then I would imagine just like every inch of awareness along the way. Again, I don't know exactly what Don is saying, but that would be my assumption.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would also say another reason just to be committed to not having alcohol in your own system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like all those things that I just said, I would rather have my brain with me than dumbed down. I can't even imagine trying to fight when I'm drunk. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to reiterate what you said last time, there's a very interesting Huberman podcast about the science of what alcohol does to your brain.
Oh yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So did I leave any broad stroke pieces out for you? Like you as an untrained fighter, do you now have more of a framework and a complete closed loop system? Right?
Look at MFG's comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Here you go. So Lucas is saying a multi-time world champion at my gym was in an altercation a month ago, took the guy down, neutralized him, asked him if it was over, and the guy said yes.
Yeah.
Let him up. The guy pulled out a gun and shot him in the head. Fighting is stupid, and I've trained jiu-jitsu for 12 years. Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, guys, MFG, Mike Gibbons, not guilty by a jury of his peers. I just want to set the record straight. Okay, just like OJ. Go ahead.
Yeah. So now, for instance, what Lucas is saying in that situation.
Right. So some asshole starts a fight with you, and you say, okay, are you ready to tap out? Don't trust his word on that.
Yeah. Because maybe the real answer is like, are you done? And the guy says yes. It's like, okay, well, we're going to wait till the cops come because you seem like a psycho. So we're going to let them take you from here. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have unfortunate situations and circumstances. But Ray, do you now have a more complete closed feedback loop and system that you could follow more so than you originally thought?
Yeah. And like Lucas says, don't put yourself in that situation in the first place, right? Like
without a doubt.
And so Wes, like, so it begs another question, like okay, so there must be other mental health benefits for training to fight, right? Not just getting out of a jam in the parking lot or like, right? What are some of the other mental benefits that you've experienced?
So for me,
self-confidence and all that stuff.
Exactly. This might just be a me thing, but I could tell you when I started learning fighting, and I started the practice a long time ago, it gave me more confidence just in general, like even in the boardrooms, because I knew that at the end of the day, there was a stop loss at like how bad it could get. You know what I mean? Like I could sense, even when I was like in New York, I could sense like when somebody was trying to like be physically dominant inside of like an office setting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But knowing that like, okay, if you raise your voice or if you approach me, like there's nothing superficially that you could do because I know that what you're implying it could escalate to, and it's a very like subconscious low level like implying that I'm confident there. And in that micro communication, I could either choose to like stay standing straight up, or I could use to like bend down and go back to my cubicle a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And probably only I would know that. But for me, that little piece, like in my opinion, has produced outstanding dividends. So in other words, I'm not afraid to say what I actually think.
Right.
Because I know that the worst case scenario is he just has a different opinion than me. Not the worst case scenario is that if I say something that he doesn't like, that he could meet me at a bar somewhere sometime, or he could express his physical dominance. And as I don't even like saying that out loud, but I can tell you I've encountered it dozens of times throughout my career. And maybe it's just that I work in like kind of like an alpha type of like industry, like finance. It kind of has that vibe to it, right? Where it's like everybody's competing, et cetera. But I can tell you, man, like knowing how to handle myself physically, at least by my own standards, has given me unbelievable confidence.
Yeah,
I'll give you another.
And for that reason, it's the same as dance.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And what was the other? And I guess playing guitar, to a lesser degree, maybe, but it's the same thing. Their confidence, skills building is confidence building. I guess that is maybe the kernel of the thought.
Yeah.
And I love what the gentlemen are saying in the chat, which is they're not saying you're wrong, but they're emphasizing don't be at the bar at last call in the first place.
I would say don't even be at the bar at all.
Don't be at the bar. Like, don't, like, if there's some obnoxious guy who's drunk at a sports event, like, don't, you know what I mean? Don't engage.
Yep. I'll give you a real life example here. Now, and we could split hairs and say, well, he should just, or
even, sorry, Wes, even like, like there could even be a situation where like a guy is being rough with a woman or screaming at a woman. You have to really be careful whether you want to you want to be a hero in that situation, or you know what I mean? Or like, you have to really evaluate whether interfering is going to actually obtain the result you want.
Without a doubt. So I'll give you an example. So Ray, let me put it back to your own personal life, because I actually believe that 97% of the value here is actually on the confidence pillar, not on the physical altercation pillar, right? So I'll give you an example in your own life. Do you think, Ray, if you were trained, let's say for 6 months training, and you knew that you were very competent at handling the closed loop system that we just talked about, right? Or some version of it, that you would have reacted as intensely, let's say, to your neighbor? Like,
Right.
Was there a portion of your reaction that was like, well, this could go anywhere, and like, and he's like, and we're now like feeding off of each other? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Of course it would have been different. Of course, if I was doing MMA training and he said, I'm going to punch you in the nose, I would have said something like, I love when people punch me in the nose, you know?
Yeah.
Or like it wouldn't, I would have been prepared.
Yeah.
And like, again, that's the other pillars, like being prepared.
Exactly.
Not beating people up isn't the goal. Being prepared is the goal.
Without a doubt. I'll give you another example. A buddy of mine who was married, and they were at like a work event, literally. And this other guy who was her friend, right, pinched her butt in front of him. And now I think it was like he didn't think that he saw, sort of a thing. Now, I talked to my buddy about this, and we're really close, so I could ask him these questions, which would be hard for most men to answer. And I said, well, did you do anything? Like, what, did you say anything? And his answer was no, right? Why do you think he didn't say anything?
Give me the scenario again.
Literally, they're at a work event.
Yeah.
Like, and then some guy comes up to her, which he knew the guy, but
his girlfriend.
This was his wife.
Or his wife, okay.
Yeah.
Pinched
so
her
his
booty.
wife. So
Okay.
another guy comes up and pinches her butt, sort of a thing. And in like kind of like a joking way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I presume he evaluated the threats, and it didn't rise to the level of a threat requiring physical confrontation.
Yeah. So his answer was because he didn't feel like he could handle it, like if it got to that level. Like better just to not say anything. But his real answer was like not because I'm being the bigger man. It was because if I say something, you can very quickly connect the dots of how it could escalate, right?
At a work function.
Exactly. And I can't, his fear was he couldn't handle himself if it were to escalate. So therefore he chooses not to say anything, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
and what Kaizen is saying, yes, unfortunately. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, then do you, and you could
it's
argue
just an evaluation. So it's just the evaluation of the risks. Like, are you saying his buddy didn't think he could win? Your buddy said he didn't think he could win.
My buddy basically admitted, he's like, I don't think I could do anything. Right. So I'd rather just not engage. But there's consequences to not engaging. Now, I'm not saying you got to go and punch the guy in the face, but like, what I would hope that would be one of the other alternatives is like, you go up to the guy and say, hey, like, let's discuss this real quick. What you just did, I'm not going to play around with that. Like, you're lucky, right? Like, let's talk about this right now. And I'm going to solve this right now. And we're going to bring my wife involved. Like, what's going on here? Right. And I'm not afraid to have that conversation with you because what you did was wrong. Now, I'm also not afraid if you advance on me, and I'm ready for that. Right. Like, that sort of thing. So versus I want to know myself as somebody who can handle that kind of altercation, and the goal should be verbal. Right.
Right. So Wes, like, what do you score your friend's performance in that situation then? Did he make the right call? Or
I would say
was he not? Did he not have the training that you're talking about?
so. I would say there's a difference between what the outcome was and how you got there.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, there's a difference, in my opinion. There's a difference in, oh, I didn't engage because it wasn't worth the effort or the time or the risk, versus I didn't engage because I knew that I was not capable of handling what could have been the subsequent events.
Mm-hmm.
And what that teaches me about me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because the situation I'm using is a real life example, but it could have been different. It could have been a threatening situation to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that difference would make a massive difference. Somebody's attacking your wife. You do not know what to do. What happens then?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do you wait for the police to come? Right? Now, again, it's very, very, very unlikely, but we also can't say that it doesn't happen because it happens all the time. Small probability, but spread over enough time and enough people, it happens.
Right. And I think you mentioned something last week or in the previous week where by knowing how to fight, you don't go out looking for a fight,
No.
but on the contrary, you see many fewer risks out there, right? So you're actually a lot more comfortable because before maybe your threat alert system told you that anyone your age or any adult male was a threat.
Yep.
Right. But now having done training, 1% of males are a threat.
Exactly. You've reduced your threat circle.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then you know how to use your body in case that threat were to actually come to reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would say for all men who are interested, even slightly interested, I would say highly consider getting trained in fighting.
And just and again, your recommendation is like go straight to and start with the MMA gym. Don't learn your basics there.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. Without a doubt.
Okay. So skip the jiu-jitsu gym. If street defense is your goal.
Yes.
Now there is a kind of jiu-jitsu, maybe one of the gentlemen can say it like, there is a kind of jiu-jitsu that's more adaptable to street defense, which is called like Moab or so. It's like some short word like that, maybe.
Yeah, they've got combat jiu-jitsu now, which is like slaps and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily care. Like, yeah, you would totally be effective if you went to a jiu-jitsu gym and learned that. I'm just saying you would leave gaps by my perspective, you would leave gaps in your defenses because they might not tell you. It's like, oh, well, yeah, in that position, this guy could just knock you out with his fist.
And how much jiu-jitsu have you done?
Jiu-jitsu, I wish I would have started earlier, but I've probably done now collectively 4 months of training in jiu-jitsu.
And are there other than the advantages or disadvantages of street fighting protection, are there other benefits to going to a jiu-jitsu gym that you've enjoyed?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, it's all the stuff that we talk about: structure, discipline, a sense of respect, etc. So that's where, again, you can get lost in what's the real goal. Because if you go in without like an effectiveness goal, like what is the effective goal for you? Maybe the effective goal is I need a healthy place to go and spend my time, right? That's just nice to go and do on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, then hell yeah, you can go off in perpetuity and just practice casually. But that's a different goal than I need to become as effectively proficient at this as efficient as possible, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So cool. I'd rather get effective first and then decide if I want to have a casual pursuit of the hobby after.
And so do you see yourself going back to jiu-jitsu at all, or are you sticking with MMA from now on?
Probably sticking with MMA. Like for me, I'm not doing it for fun. I'm literally not doing it for fun. I'm doing it as a sense of security hygiene, right? Like I just want to keep my skills sharp. Like I'm going in through like a deeper zone right now because I do want to be able to teach it to the guys. Like, hey, in case anybody's interested, here's what I learned, and here's the most effective and the most in the most efficient way, right? But then it's not something like I'm going to stop 5 months from now and then not pick up. Like I don't have it for the rest of my life. I'd rather have a low simmer so I can maintain the skills for as long as possible.
All right. All right. Well, I haven't decided whether I'm going to do jiu-jitsu or MMA. I committed to doing jiu-jitsu to myself. Yeah. The MMA is a kind of a new wrinkle that I'm going to have to think about. But Don is recommending and jiu-jitsu. Lucas is saying jiu-jitsu is the ground game of MMA, which I suppose means that it's the foundation.
Well, it's when you take the fight to the ground that most MMA guys are doing jiu-jitsu. It's not 100% of them, but it's very often the case where like anytime the fight's on the ground in like UFC, that's what they're doing is some form of jiu-jitsu or modified jiu-jitsu.
Right, and like you said before, like jiu-jitsu, it only took one or two MMA tournaments to for people to figure out that jiu-jitsu was the kind of skeleton key for MMA.
Yep, exactly. Now, Ray, and to your point, your point is exactly correct. This is what I don't want men to think. I don't want them to think that, oh, they have to go and become a jiu-jitsu player, right? It's like, no, how about you just say, I need to, as a man, consider taking 20 classes in effective fighting. I don't have to do this every single week for the rest of my life, but I do need to reach critical mass of, do I know how to handle myself physically? Right. So you don't have to you don't have to like it.
For you, it's a basic skill. Like it's like a basic level of understanding of accounting in order to be able to file your taxes.
Exactly.
Or like in order to be able to run a household effectively.
Exactly.
So
it's
foundational knowledge.
I would imagine that if we were to poll 1,000 men and say, what if you had to say, what would be the practical skills of a man? I would be shocked if knowing how to defend yourself is not in the top 5. Some men might think, oh, it's not important at all. And I would say, well, you have a massive gap in your skill set as a male if you do not know how to defend yourself and your family.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe his wife does that, provides that function.
Maybe his wife is Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Wes, we're just past an hour. I love your enthusiasm for this. This and the alternative minimum tax. Like nothing really makes your eyes sparkle like these two subjects.
Yeah.
So, and then so thank you for this. I'm gonna within the next 4 weeks, I'm definitely gonna do my first MMA or jiu-jitsu class. Awesome. People who are recovered from drugs. I saw some kind of like meme or something that people who recover from drugs and alcohol invariably find Jesus, deadlift, and jiu-jitsu. Right? Those are like those three. Yep. Those are the three kind of pillars of the new way of living. So I'm definitely going to do MMA or jiu-jitsu within the next 4 weeks, and then I would love to attack cognitive behavior therapy on Monday. If you can put the title of the book, maybe an Amazon link to the book in the Discord, and then we can just do a kind of like an introduction into CBT on Monday.
And then how about the next Friday we keep finishing up the energy book?
Oh, well, okay. In that case, we can do a roundup of levels of energy on Monday just to close the book.
Let's do that to close out the book.
Okay.
Cool. Dudes, thank you so much, Don, Kaizen, Gunther, Gibbons, etc. Thank you guys for all participating in this.
Yes, and thank you guys for using the chat to call Wes on his bullshit. Stick to the numbers, Wes. Yeah. I got my squad of gorillas here, ready for action any day, anywhere. Okay.
That's right. All right, dudes. Love you guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, sir.